Okay guys, welcome back to this new video, React from ground up. In this video we are going to be looking at everything React. So we are going to look at everything from the basic concepts to advanced concepts in React. And the interesting thing about this video is that you are going to be understanding why some concepts have been introduced into React. Why you have the React navigator, for example, the context API, why you have hooks, why you have the notion of pages and components, and you are going to see how all these concepts relate to each other, so that when you're building your React projects, you actually know why you are using the particular feature in React. So for those who have been building applications without actually understanding why you use certain concepts in React, this tutorial is the perfect tutorial for you. So we are going to start by understanding what React is all about. We'll see how to create a React app. We'll understand the files that come with the React app. You see how to structure your files when your project goes. And we'll look at all these concepts from the basic ones to the complex ones. So for those who have not looked at the video in which I explain the different concepts you need to know before you start learning a front-end development framework like React, I advise you to check that video, because if you don't know those concepts, it's going to be complicated working with React. Some JavaScript concepts are very important, fundamentals of HTML and CSS, but I encourage you to look at that video in detail, and I'm sure you are going to be able to proceed with your React journey and front-end development frameworks very easily. Okay, what is React? So React, like Angular and Vue and other front-end development frameworks, are basically single-page application frameworks. So by that, you write the front-end development code, you write your code, and when you deploy to a server, the server now just needs to send a single HTML page which is rendered on the front end, and from there it takes on and handle all the other things like routing, injection of data, and all that is handled on the front end. So basically with front end development frameworks, you have very serious code written on the front end, because you are going to be handling many things on the front end like routing and all that stuff. So React helps you do this very easily, because with React you can basically just write your HTML, CSS and JavaScript code in a single JS file, and that's enough to have your application up and running. So React also has very powerful libraries that can help you do things like graphs, animations, and many others. So those are just npm libraries you install in React, and you can link them to your application to have those heavy functionalities. So let's go ahead and create a React app and go through the other concepts. So to create a React app, you just need to go to the folder in which you want to create the application. In this case, I'm on Windows, but for those on Mac, you can go to your terminal as well and do the same thing. So let's say I want to create a folder here in this project. I'm just going to type cmd here, and it's going to open my command prompt for Windows. For those on Mac, you open your terminal in the folder, and you can create now the project by typing so npx create React app and name of your app. So let's just call this one React ground up. So after hitting enter, it's going to go ahead and download all the necessary dependencies and code to create a new React app. The React project has gone ahead and it has been downloaded, and everything now is ready. So we're going to go ahead and open the project in VS Code. If you remember, the name of the project was React ground up. So here is it, React ground up. So we're going to right click and open with code. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is understanding the files that come with a new React project. So when you go ahead and create a React project, you have this folder, the node modules folder. The first folder, it has all the different folders that are the boilerplate code that are necessary for a React project to run. So these folders here contain different code which are actually necessary for you to be able to run the React project. Then the next folder is the public folder. In this public folder, the only important thing you need to know here is this index.html. So this index.html is the entry point to your React code, and this is actually the single HTML file that is sent back from the server and is being rendered on your client application. So this is the only important file there in this public. The other ones are just basic resources that are loaded inside this index.html that are not really important. The next one is this source folder, and in this source folder there are many important files. As you can see here, the main one is also this index.js. You have this app.js as well, app.css, index.css, and some of the other ones are not important, and we're going to go ahead and delete the files which are not important in some time. But let's go ahead and complete the explanation of these different files first before we delete them. So the next one is the git ignore, which is used by version control to track the folders that are not going to be pushed to GitHub or to your source control management. So the package.json here, you have scripts which are important for starting your project. For example, we are going to use the npm start in a short while to run our project. The other block, the dependencies block, is where you have the different dependencies for this project. This dependencies block. So these are all the dependencies that were installed in your node modules. So all these dependencies here were installed in your node modules for you to be able to run this React app. And you have this readme, which is also not important for now. We can delete the readme if you like. So to start the React project, you run the script in the package.json, the npm. As we saw in the package.json, we have this script here, this start script, and so on this start script is what is going to start the project. If you type npm start or npm1 start, it's the same thing. It's going to start your React project by running this script, which actually runs React scripts start. So it's going ahead and starting our project. So why it starts our project, let's just explain some important files and behavior you expect here. So if you look at the source, the index.js actually is our entry file. So this is the file that is going to be loaded into your root index.html. So you see here, if you notice this line, root console equal react DOM create root get element by id. So it gets this root element in your public folder, this index.html. You notice this root div here, this div with an id of root. So inside here, your index.js, we grab the root element, which is what we just saw, and we are going now to render the content of into that root. We are going to render this app component. So this app component is imported, and the app component is actually this component here. So this component that contains all your code actually is what's injected into the index.js, and the index.js renders it into this root element in your index.html. So that's basically the flow. So everything starts here in your app.js, and as you are going to be seeing in a short while, after this npm start has run successfully and you want your project, it's actually going to display this content. So you are going to have an image, you are going to have a certain paragraph with the text edit and save to reload, and you are going to have a link, and you are going to have some text line here. So this is actually what's going to be rendered as the application you are going to presently see. So here is the default React app we have, and as we said, you have the image, you have the text, you have the link. So then React. So basically all the modifications you need to be doing to modify for your React project, to change your React project, has to be linked to this app.js. So I'm going to go ahead quickly and delete the files which are not actually useful here. I'll delete all these ones: logo, import web vitals, setup test, and delete them. I'm going to leave the app.js. Delete all these ones. App test as well, and even the app CSS. I'm going to leave the index. I'm going to leave index.css, these ones, and even here as well you can delete some of these things, manifest, robot, bomb. I'm just going to leave them, and the one I'm going to leave was in the public. I think I've deleted the unimportant from the source. I come to the index, I have this web vitals, I can delete it. This web vitals here. Look at the index.css as well. can delete all of these and delete all of these. The app.js, I think we can also delete all of these. Yeah, we can leave these. So if we save now, let me just delete this and put the text here, app. And since this logo, I deleted the logo and I didn't clear it off from there. The app.css as well are deleted. So now I think everything should work fine. So I have the text app as we expected. The common ways to structure your growing React project is the next thing we're looking at. How to structure the files in your React project. So generally inside the source is where you are going to be adding new files, and you can add a new folder as well. So let's say pages. Your web application is going to be made up of pages, so in general you are going to create a folder called pages. You can also create a folder called components, because pages are made up of components. So I'm going to explain this as we earlier mentioned in the tutorial. This video is for those to explain all the concepts and how they are related to each other, so that you know how to use them and when to use them. So pages and components are first of all the two main common building blocks of a React application. So in general, you are going to be having pages, and those pages are going to be made up of components. So let's say for example you have a home page, and that page is going to be a file. So this JS file is going to contain the code for the home page. So we call it home.js, and with some extensions downloaded. Like if you look at our extensions here, the extensions I use are React, Redux, snippets. This one ES7 React Redux, React native snippets. So with this extension installed, you can use some shortcuts which you are going to be seeing me using. So you need to install that extension, and you are going to be able to follow ahead with some of the shortcuts like that. To create a React component is React arrow function component export. This one, when you hit on enter on it, you see that it automatically creates you this React component, the home component. So this is actually a React component, but it's actually what we call a page. So inside this page, you create this JavaScript file, and the boilerplate is certain React component. So this is actually the home page, and we know that normally pages are made up of components. But if you didn't know, then now you know that, because basically in front-end frameworks like React, Angular, and the others, you use the notion of components to subdivide complex functionalities. Because your home page, for example, can have a top nav bar, you can have a side, you can have a footer. Like let's say for example we decide to have those different components. So I'm going to have the nav bar in the home component. So I'm going to have it's going to be a div, yeah, and inside here we're going to have the nav. So I'm just going to give it a title of the nav bar. You come down inside. After that, you are going to have, like, let's see, the main content of your website. We'll call it the main. You are going to have an aside. I'm going to call it aside. Use the aside. So these are HTML semantic elements, and are very important for SEO and for other. So you use aside here. We're just going to call it the aside. Then you have the footer. We're going to call it the footer. So if we save now, nothing is going to happen. It's not going to take effect, because this home component has not been imported in our app.js. If you remember, as I said from earlier, app.js is actually where it's like where everything is referenced from the source. So you have to come into this return and put in the home component you just created. You are going to say return home. Hit enter here is going to import the home component you just created. And if you save now and you take a look, you should see that nav bar. See the nav bar, the main, aside, and footer. So those are the different components we created. I'm just going to add some basic styling so that it looks a bit close to reality. So I'm going to throw this main and aside inside the div. So I'm going to style it. Call this div dot container. Let me just call it container. I'm going to throw these guys into it. And now we are going to do some styling here. I'm going to go to our index.css where we are going to do our styling. So I'm going to add here a box sizing of border box, and the styles. I'm going to give the nav bar a width of 100%. Let me just say 90%. No problem. Let me say 100%. Well, since as is a div, normally it's already taking up 100% of the width, so I just no need specifying 100%. I just need to give a border of 1 pixel solid black. I think I'm going to do that for all of them. I'm going to give the nav, the main, aside, and footer. I'm going to give all of them borders. Okay, for the container div that contained our main and our side container, I'm going to give it a display of flex, so that if we go back to our home, let's take a look. Class name container, so it's the container div. I'm going to give it a display of flex, so that the main and the aside stand left and right, stand on the same row. So I'll give you a display of flex. Then the container, the main, I'm going to give you a width of 70%. And I'm going to give you a width of 70% of its parent, since as is the main area. It should be normally wider than the aside, which I'm going to give 30%. Aside, I'm going to give you a width of 30% of the parent. Then the height of this container, I'm going to make it about 80% of the viewport width, and just make it 70% of the view of the 70 VH, 70% of the viewport height. Yeah, okay. Then now the footer with the other border. So if I save now and we take a look, so you see that everything is taking shape. We have our nav bar, our main, our aside, and we have our footer. I'm just going to give some margin between them so that they can clearly demark them from their boundaries. So I'm just going to give a margin of 5 pixels around each of them. Save now. So you clearly see each portion of our website. You have the nav bar, you have the main, you have the aside, you have the footer. So in general, this is what we normally have when developing. We have these different portions of our website, of our page. On different pages, these different pages are going to have different portions. This is just an example, and if you take note, most of the times we'll need to repeat the footer and the nav bar, and probably the aside also in different pages. But we don't need to duplicate our code, because let's say if we have another page, let's just call it the products page. I'm going to call it products.js, and we are going to boilerplate React have a function component export. Boilerplate, we have full docs. So we have this full docs page, and let's say in this full docs page you want to have the navbar as well, the right aside and the footer. Traditionally, the way you can accomplish this is by going to the home page. You copy all of this and modify the content. So basically, it's what we call, this is code duplication, because we are repeating ourselves. So we are going to copy the code of the navbar, the container. We have now the main content. We can also call this products, and this can display. For us to be able to display, we have to go to our home page and choose that it should return products instead. I'm going to import this, and you have to comment this other line. So if you save now, you see that products displays quite already what expected. So I have now products instead of the main content, and I think in the home page I'm going to change this to the home content. Yeah, and in products I'm going to call this products content. Okay, so if we save this, we see that products here has products content. That's actually what we desire, but that's code repetition because I've copied everything that was there, the navbar, the footer, and the aside. But if you were to change, for example, the aside here in products, and you wanted to change everywhere in the application, you need to go to each of those individual components, move to the home page as well, and modify the aside. And that's very cumbersome, especially in a situation where the code, for example, is really bulky. Let's say maybe the navbar had like, let's say some links, for example. Let's just say he had the link to home, and he had the link to products as well. Products. Let's say this footer had a span that had copyright. Let's just say copyright 2023. He had another span as well. Span that says let's just say all rights reserved. Let's see what that. Then the right aside had something like, let's see, he had an li as well. Let's just say he had a div adverts, and he had another div as well. More products, more from us. So let's see what all of this, and that's modification. These modifications have been done in the home page now. So the products page does not have it because they are completely separate components, meaning that any modification you do to the navbar, to the footer, or to any component in one of the pages, you need to copy it back to the other page, and that's not really maintainable. So to achieve that, what we do is we separate this into separate components so that you can just import those components and it has all the functionalities and the code you require. So what we do is we create separate components for all of these. The navbar, since as we know that the navbar's code which is going to be repeated, we create a new component called navbar, your own custom component called navbar.js. And what we do is that in this navbar.js, you are going now to use all this code for the navbar so that you don't repeat yourself. You are going to come here and paste that code for the navbar. You can create a new component as well for the footer.js. You do the same thing. Go back to your home.js, grab the code for the footer, and you put in this footer component. Same as well for the right aside. So I'm going to call it right aside.js. go to the home component, the code for the right side, come back to your right side and replace. And what you do now is you are going now to import these components, these different components now back in the pages, so that you are not repeating yourself and the code is actually simplified. Because instead of using all of this, you are just going to be using navbar here. You import the navbar, you use the navbar. In the place of all of this, you use the right side, you import it and use it. And the footer as well, you replace all of this with the footer you just created, you import it and you use it. That's the same thing you are going to be doing in the products page, and all that code is centralized. So you use the navbar you created, the general navbar component here, navbar, import it, you use it, right aside, import it, use it, and the footer, import it and use it. If you save now and you take a look in your browser, you notice now that all of that is being imported into the different components. Notice your navbar has the home products, then the products content is there. It also has the right aside modifications, it has the footers modifications. And if you load instead the home page now, you notice that the home page also has all those modifications because it's the component you imported as well, the same components you imported in the home page. So it's just the home page content that changes, but if not, it has all these the same components. And that's how code can now be reused, because any modification you perform here, like let's say if you add a new component, home products, let's just say about in the navbar, and save, it's now going, this change is going to be noticed in all of the components that use this navbar. You just need to modify it once in this navbar component, and all the other pages or components that use it are going to have those updates. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be looking at now are dynamic values. So if we check here, we've already looked at pages components. So the next thing we're taking a look at now is dynamic values and content in your page. So if you understand now what's happening here, we want to go ahead and see how the value can actually be dynamic, and that's actually easy to accomplish because React makes that very easy with the curly braces, which you can use to interpolate dynamic values. So let's say we are in our home.js, and in this main here where we have the home content, and let's say we want this home content text here to be dynamic. What you have to do is inside this home function, which is your home function you export, you are going to use you can use the const keyword, which is actually to define now a variable. Let's just say home content variable should be equal to the home content. And the way you use that in your template is use these curly braces and you precise the variable home content, and that's all. If you save now, you're going to notice that it's going to behave in the same way. You have the home content text displayed in here, and that's actually how you use dynamic values. So if you change this to something like the home works and save, notice that it's going to have the content the home works, and anything you do here is going to be, so you can have as many of these dynamic values as you like. And it's the same thing that applies for attributes like styles, links, and anything. So you can have let's say still in this very home, let's say you have just say you have an anchor element here, you have an anchor element, and you want this href to be dynamic. So you can use curly braces as well here for this href to be dynamic. I can precise here the href. You can just see here const the link. You and just say maybe https google.com, and you can, in here you just see the link, and here you precise your text. You just see here Google, and you save. Notice now that this link is going to be dynamic, means if this user clicks here, it's actually going to navigate the user to google.com. So that's actually dynamic values, and you can do that with arrays as well. So let's say we create an array and want to iterate through over the array and display some values. You can create an array. Let's just say const array to be equal to an array of, let's just say strings. Let's just say boy, girl, male. Just save this array of strings. Let's say we want to iterate over this array of strings. What you do is you are going to make a template, use this curly braces as well, and you are going to use, you can use the JavaScript map method to iterate over it. So map, you are going to say array.map. For each iteration you take the item, and you are going to return, it's going to return an array. So for each iteration, let's say you want to return an li, that contains the item for the iteration. So you put here li item. I think need some curly braces again, item, and if you save now, take a look. Yeah, you notice that it iterates through this array over this array, and for each iteration it displays the item. That's how you use dynamic values here in JavaScript. So you can use it for strings, for arrays, and you can't use it for booleans, but yeah, you get the point. The next thing we are going to be looking at now are events. The common events we know are normally click events, mouse over events, scroll events, and yeah. So let's take a look at the common click event we know in. So let's create a button. Let's just create a button here inside the main. We are going to create a button, and let's say when the user clicks on this button, we want to just console log something to the terminal. So I'm just going to call click me, and I wonder when the user clicks on this button. Yeah, so I have the button click me. I wonder when the user clicks here, I like to log you click me to the terminal. So on click on this button, what you need to do is add an event listener here, and the way you add it is you use on click property, and this on click attribute you have here in this button element, you need to precise what the code you want to run when the user clicks on this button. So you can directly put into this on click the function you want to execute. You can use an anonymous arrow function here and just console log, you just say clg, you click me, you click me. We save now. Notice that when click on this button, we have the you click me text here in our console. So you could still decide to separate this function completely and define the function out of this, and just put the reference here. So you can define the function here out of the return for separation of consent. So in the case where the function is really lengthy, you can separate it here, call it, let's see, click handler, click handler, and here you just copy the reference to the function and paste here. So when the user clicks on the button, that function is going to be called. The user comes now and click. So notice that the same code is executed. And in case where this method normally needs to take a parameter, what you can do is, normally it's not, if you put the parameter directly here, like click me, then put in, let's say the parameter is some text, and you know that this function has to take a string text. You just see string, and you have to console log the string here, console log string. If you do this, it's not going to work. All you have to do is, if the function takes a parameter, you need to put it, you need to use an anonymous function inside this curly braces for precising the parameter. Click handler some text. Then now if you save and you click, it's going to console log that text, some text. Yeah. So I think that's the main thing you need to know for event handlers. There are also event handlers for inputs. The unchanged event handler for inputs. This one is for buttons, because those are the common event handlers you are going to be using for the submit event on a form and on user input. So let's say we use an input, a text input. An input is a text input, and if we save now, just so that you take a look at this input. So I have this input here. I wonder, when the user enters some text and he clicks on this button, we console log the text he entered into this input. So the way you do that is, you have to be grabbing the value from this input as the user types. So you can use the unchanged event handler on this input, and you can even console log the text directly after each character as the user enters. So this unchanged takes a function, and this function by default is going to have the event. It's going to have the event. So this function by default takes the event, and from that event you can get the value. So you know that event, if you console log event dot target dot value, it's going to give you the value inside this input field. So if we save now, so every time the user enters a character into this input field, you are going to have it locked here in our console. That's really interesting. You see that these event listeners are actually easy to bind. So and you can have a form as well, that when the user hits on the enter key, it's going to submit the form. So that one is also, you just create a form which is going to have your different form inputs. We have input, have the first input, and we have a placeholder. So placeholder, your name. We have the next input, your age. The next input, let's see, your sex, and we have a button here. Button is submit. I wonder, when the user submits this form by either hitting the enter key or clicking on this button, the form should get submitted. So the way you do that is, you add an event listener here, which is the submit event listener on this form. I put in the method you want to be executed when the user is on the submit. So in this case, I'm going to just put the reference of the function here. I'm not going to define the function in here, so I'm just going to say handle submit. Handle submit is going to be the name of the reference name for this function. I'm going to go out of here and create a function. I could have created inside there, but I just want some separation of concern. So if I use a shortcut met, met is a shortcut also from that React library I'll show you guys, and it helps me boilerplate a function easily. So I can now just type const here, I paste the name of that function, it's going to take in the event as well, the submit event. And the first thing I'm going to do is to prevent default so that the browser does not refresh. e.prevent default so that the browser does not refresh. And after that, I'm going to console log. So you can basically have this event submitter, and when the user submits the form, the user finishes and hits the enter, you just submit the form, do some validation. So then afterwards you submit the form. The form was submitted. And if you click on submit, after entering some values and doing some things, click on submit, it says the form was submitted. So basically those are the most common event listeners in React you are going to be working with most of the time. Okay, so the next thing is passing data or props from one component to another, and the general idea is you'll be passing data from a parent component to a child component, or maybe from the other way around, the child to the parent, but most cases is going to be from the parent to the child. So let's say you have some data in this home component and you want to pass that data to the listing to one of the child components in this home component. Let's say you want to pass that data to let's see here, this one is not the best. Let's say you have some data in the app.js and you want to pass that data to the home component. So I'm going to have some data here. It's going to be an array. Let's just create an array here. Let's just call it products. Okay, starting to make sense. So I'm going to pass it to the products component instead. I want to pass this products to the products component. Let's say you make a fetch here in this component, an HTTP request, I get the products in a certain products array. Let's say you have car, bike, phone, television. Okay, so you have these different products and you want to pass down these products to the products component so that I can display them in the products component. These products are in a different component. They are present in the app component, but you want to use them in the products component. If we take a look at the application presently, you notice that the products content is empty. So the way you do that is you are going to use an attribute here. You can just name it anything. In this case, we'll call products as well, a small letter, and we're going to dynamically use these curly braces to pass in these products. So when you do this, it's going to reference this products variable here and it's going to pass it into this products attribute inside this products element. So what you can do is you can come now to this products component or products page, and you are going to destructure it from that object. So there's a prop attribute here, and you can destructure now the products you passed in here. So everywhere in this component now we have access to those products you passed from the home component. You can now use these products, which refers, this products here refers to this, and you have now this other products attribute which refers now to this one. So you can now use the products here, and if we just decide to, let's just say console log products in this component, just to ensure that products is actually what we are expecting. So I just say console log products. Let me see, just to ensure that products is what we are expecting. If we look at it, we notice now that products is actually what we are expecting. We have here car, bike. I just zoomed in so that we can see better. So we have here car, bike, phone, television, as we expect. So you see that products is actually being passed down successfully to this component because we can console log it here. And it's similar. There are cases where you want to execute functions, you define a function as well in this component, and you want to run the function from the child component. You can also do that. You just say you create a function. It's the same concept because that functions can be stored in variables in JavaScript. So you just create a function. Let's just say let's just call let me use make const in app.js. In app.js. So this function is just going to console log I was called from app.js. So what you do is you can pass down this function, the function, let's just say the function, that's what we are going to name it, and it's going to be actually that our function in app.js. So pass down this function, and we're going to destructure the function as well inside our products. So in addition to grabbing the products, we're also taking that function from there, and we want to call the function. So let's just say we create a button here. Inside here we create a button and call function. And when the user clicks on that button, we want to call that function. So we are going to attach our event listener as well on click. And when the user clicks, we are going to call the function. I think that's fine. So if we save now, we're in the products page. You see the button. When the user clicks on the button, you notice that our function is called I was called from app.js. So that is actually very intuitive and interesting, as you can easily perform these actions in React with ease without much code. Understand that everything is flowing here. Okay, so that was for passing data and props, and now we're going to look at hooks in React. And the common hooks are the useState and useEffect hooks, which you can basically use to accomplish almost anything you can think of. There are other hooks like the memo, ref, and but we're going to be looking at the main hooks here. I think you can accomplish about 90% of what you can think of with these hooks. So the first hook we are going to be taking a look at is the useState hook. And the useState hook is used to manage state, just state in some components in React. So let's go back to our let's just say we'll go to our products component, our home component. No problem. Let's first of all clean up this component so that it looks more simple. Clean up the component. Let's say we have some state we want to manage. So I'm going to say we have a state of, let's say, a user, a logged in user. I want to manage that user state. So let's say we have user. So the way you use the useState is you use the it's actually a function. It's actually a function that returns an array, and the first component in that array is actually the name of the state you want to manage. Let's say user, and the next function is the method you use to mutate that state. So we call it set. Is the set user, or the set the name of the variable, and after that you use the method name. Let's say we call it useState, and it has now the initial value of the user or the state variable. So in this case we are just going to say the user is null. There is no user. Okay, so if we have this initially, and that's actually the user state. Like presently there is no user, the user has a state of null. Let's say we want to console log. Inside here we want to interpolate the user. So we are going to say inside the main, we are just going to put a div here. So let's just say inside the main we just interpolate user. Well, presently there is no user, so let's first of all load our from the app.js. Let's ensure that it's actually our home component which is loaded, not the products component. So we'll ensure that it's our home component which is loaded, and I didn't import useState in home.js. So we need to import useState from React. So we import useState and we save now. Okay, so I refresh that and notice that there's no user actually, so that's why nothing is printed, because actually we need to have the user printed here in the main, but since as user is null, we have nothing printed. So let's say we are going to have an input which we are going to use to set the user. So it's an input that when the user enters, when you enter a username, it's used to set the state of the user. So in this input, let's just say a button. Let's just say a button is going to be simpler. So I'm just going to say a button which when the user clicks on, set we'll just call it set user. That's the label on the button, and when the user clicks on that button on click, we are going to set the user variable to a certain value now, so that there is a user. So when the user clicks on the button, we are going to call a function which is now going to set the user. So you take note of, remember this method here, set user, is what is used to mutate the user. So we call that method, we pass in the new value of the user I want to set. Let's just call it Joe, and we save. Okay, that button was out of its place. So the button, I wanted the button to be inside the main. I'm going to cut it and paste here, and I want this to be inside the div. Okay, so if we click on that button, it has to set the user now to Joe. So we have this button, and if we click on it, you see that it sets the user to Joe, and that's why this div now appears, because the user now has some value and it is now Joe. That's why it text Joe appears. And you notice that what's happening is when the state changes, the DOM re-renders and it actually displays the new user value, and that's only possible using this set users method. Because if you were to, let's say for example, create a user variable and update it manually without using this useState method, the DOM is not going to re-render. Let's say for example, I have a variable, I'm going to say let user, I'm going to say user is null initially, and when the user clicks on this button, instead of doing set user, I'm instead going to say user should be equal to Joe. But normally you expect that this should do the same thing, because actually it's the same code we are executing in this case. What I'm doing is I'm taking this user variable and I'm setting it to the string Joe. But the problem here is that the DOM is not going to render. If I set it, the DOM does not modify, so this interface does not actually reload to take into account the new user's value which has been set from this clip. And that's because when you use this method, this approach, React does not re-render the DOM. But if you decide to console log, for some reason you decide to console log, you are going to see that it's actually going to have this user variable. So actually this variable has been modified to Joe, but the DOM has not been rendered. For the DOM to be rendered, you need to use the approach by using this set state. You need to use this set state method to be able to update the DOM. So you need to use the useState so that the DOM is updated and you get the new value printed, displayed there. So that's how state management using the useState works in React. And it's the same thing you will do if you had input fields in your template, and you wonder as the user types you update the DOM. You are going to track all those different inputs using state variables. You are going to track all those inputs using state variables, so that when the inputs change, the DOM can be render and you can see the updated changes on the UI. Okay, so the next one is the useEffect hook. The useEffect is used when you want to perform side effects when the component loads, and in most cases is when you want to perform HTTP requests. So the useEffect is used when you want to perform side effects on a particular state variable change, or when the component just reloads. The component just loads. So let's say I'm going to explain the useEffect here in this products component. So the useEffect, like the useState, is also imported from React, and it's basically just a function, useEffect. So I can use the shorthand useEffect. I hit enter. So this is actually the useEffect. This is how the useEffect function looks like. So we have this useEffect, this function, and it takes another function as a callback function, and it has an array, this dependency array that determines when the useEffect is going to be called. So when the array is empty, it means this useEffect is going to be called immediately this component loads. The first time the component loads. So inside this method, this first method, you put in the code you want to execute when the component loads. So if I just print here console log the component loaded, the components first load, and I see. So I need to import useEffect first of all from React. So I'm going to import it from React, and if I save now and I load this component, the products component, so if you notice presently it's not going to display to the console because the component has not been mounted. The component which is mounted now is actually this home component. So you notice that the console does not console lock. You don't see this console lock of the products component. So you don't see this console lock of the component's first load, because this is not actually the products component. So for this products component to load in the app.js, as usual, as previous, you need to come and make sure it's our products component which is actually mounted here in our app.js. So if I save now, notice that immediately the component loads. You have this message here, the components first load. It's console log twice, but it's no big deal. The main thing down where the component is, immediately the component mounts, is going to console log that the component loads. Okay, so that's the useEffect in case. And notice that the very useful situations when you can be calling this useEffect method is when you want to fetch data on the components load, because you can fetch data from a REST API or a backend server, and when the data is available, you display that data here in your template. And using this useEffect, performing the HTTP request inside it's a perfect time in this useEffect hook. So you can also run the useEffect when the state variable changes. Let's say for example, you have this products here, and let's say for example, let's just create another let's just say likes. Let's just call a variable likes, const likes. We just say the likes presently, you have 3 likes. Okay, let's use the useState, because as I mentioned, you can't mutate the variable directly like that, so you need to use the useState. And we're going to call it likes, set likes. Initially the likes, you have 0 likes, and we want that when the likes change, we'll console log your likes were incremented. Or console log you now have a certain number of likes. So we'll just console log you now have. I'm going to use template backticks here for template details. You now have likes. So you now have, it's going to replace this likes with the number of likes you have here, with a certain number of likes. So I want this to run every time the likes changes. I want it to console log, you now have a certain number of likes. So I'm going to come in here. I'm also going to change this. I wonder when the user clicks on this button, which I'm going to call increment likes. You should call that function. The user clicks on that button, increment likes. You should basically what I should do, I'm going to use on click here. The user clicks on this button, I should set the likes to the likes plus 1. So I'm going to set state. I'm going to set likes to be likes plus 1 or likes plus plus, same thing. So every time the user clicks on the likes on this button, increment likes, what I'm doing is I'm incrementing the likes variable. I'm setting the likes to be the initial likes plus 1, and when that happens, because this useEffect has a dependency of the likes, it means every time likes changes, it's going to run this function. So it's going to call this console log. You have the number of likes. You see useState is not defined, so I have to import useState 1. So maybe that's better. Okay, so if I click on increment likes, see now that it tells you have 1 like, basically 1 likes. If you click again, now tells you have 2 likes. So every time we increment the likes variable, this useEffect is van, because it has this likes dependency, and it's going to console log the number of likes at that point in time. So that's actually interesting. So instead I can perform side effects on particular variable changes using this useEffect. I can have as many variables, state variables you want to track and perform variable. So you can create those variables, use state variables here, and anytime any of them change, this useEffect is going to run. So that's all about the useEffect, and having that in mind, you can basically create complex functionalities. Okay, custom hooks. So custom hooks also are very important, and custom hooks are basically just functions, as you see. Like for example, taking a look at this useState, you notice that useState actually is a function that takes a certain variable and it provides you, it returns. So these are hooks, are just functions, in other words. So they are just functions that return values and maybe provide you a certain way to modify the value if you want to be able to modify them. So that's just the general. Even something like the useEffect is also a function. Notice that in this case it returns nothing, but it's a function which when you call, you need to pass in some logic and some dependency variables you want to track. So that's just the general concept of hooks. So you can create your own hook to manage any logic you want to handle. Let's say for example, you want to create a hook. Let's just say you want to create a hook that permits you change get the theme color of your application and change the theme color. Yeah, so you can create a hook to do that, and you can just say like let's just create a hook here, and for that you can create another folder. Let's just say theme hook. Let's just say hooks, and inside here I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call theme. Theme.js. I think it's okay. Theme.js. So let's just say we have these use themes, and basically depending on what you pass into these use themes, hook, we can determine the theme. So let's just say when the number you pass in is even, it's a light theme, and when the number is odd, it's a dark theme. So basically it's telling you either light or dark based on whether the number you pass is even or odd. It's just to simulate, just to give you the idea that a hook is just a function that returns a certain value based on the user input, or performs a certain action based on the value you pass to the hook. So let's just say here it takes a number. So let's just say number, and based on the number, if the number, and inside we're just checking if number mode 2 is 0, I mean that the number is even, then we return light, return the string light to mean light theme, else we return the string dark. Return dark. Okay, so with this we can call our use themes in any other component. Let's just say we come to our app.js and want to use our theme, and let's just say we pass in in the app.js. Let's say we want to use our theme in the app.js. So we're going to need to call the theme here. Now we're going to store, we know that it returns to us a string which we call theme, and it's going to be equal to use theme, which we are going to import. And now this use theme takes in any, so normally it has detected that it's going to return light or dark, and it takes a number. So let's just say 0, let's say 1. Now in this case it's going to be odd, so it's going to return dark. So if we try to console log our theme somewhere, let's just say after this, after getting our theme, just immediately after getting our theme, try to console log the theme. In this case we need to get dark as our theme because we passed 1. Okay, so console log theme, we'll take a look. Well, that's actually our app.js console login theme. And you notice that theme is dark actually, so it's because this number is an odd number. If we put an even number, let's say 6, and we save, notice that the theme is light. So that's basically how hooks work. So hook is just a function which is you pass a value and it returns another value based on the logic defined in the hook. So that's actually all about hooks. And let's take a look now on the context API. So what's the context API? The context API helps you persist state throughout your application. So rather than passing props from one component to another, let's say you have a structure, a hierarchy of your application in which you would not like to pass state from one component through different components because it's actually cumbersome. What you want to do is you want to be able to pass use state and modify state in any component without the constraints of all the problems of that associated passing props from one component to another. So I'm going to go ahead and create the context folder. I'm going to call it context, and with this file structure here, you can store the different context you'll be using in your application here. So the first context we are going to be using is the user context, and it's basically going to help us. It's going to serve as a central store for all the user data. So we're going to be able to update and use the user data from this context in all parts of our application. So working with context, you first of all need to create the context. So let's just say we are going to export the context we are going to be creating. So let's just call it user context. And we use the create context method from React. Create context, giving it the, it takes no parameter, just create context. We're also going to need now to create the context provider, which is just a normal function which you are going to also be exporting. So we have function component export. So we are going to call this one the user context provider. So this user context provider is what we are going to be using to wrap all our components. So it's going to take them, the component is wrapping as children, and inside the body is just going to, we're just going to render those children inside the body. And we're also going to need to mention here that this container component is the user context dot provider. So basically these are user context here. The dot provider attribute on it is actually what we're using to surround these children. And now we need to pass the data which the children are going to be using. So use a value property here, and inside here you pass the data. So we're going to be passing user data inside this. So you are going to need to create the user data here, which you are going to be passing down to the component. Let's just say the user data is, let's just say is the logged in user. So I'm just going to, we can use state, or we can just, for trial now, let me just pass a constant. Const user should be equal to an object with the username. Let's just say Joe, and the user's age 23. So I'm going to pass down this user data so that all the children can access this user data. So with that, we are done with a basic context which we can share through all our components. So what you need to use now, come and wrap the components you want to consume that context with the context user context provider. So I'm going to be returning now the user context provider here, which is what we exported. If you remember from here, is what we are exporting, the user context provider. So I'm going to wrap all these children, or all the components we want to be able to consume this context. And in this case, it was the products. It's just the products we want to use to consume the context. Because we wrap this home component. So we wrap products with the user context provider, and that means inside this products component we can use the user data, which is what we wanted to share. If you remember, we made the user data available here, and we can now use the user data in this products component. The way we use it is we are going to be grabbing we're going to call it const. We're going to destructure a user from the, so we're going to call use context, which is another hook. and we are going to be passing in our context which we exported. If you remember from here, we exported the user context, so we are going to be using user context here. So this use context now permits us access the user context, and we can destructure this user data which we made available here, this user data from this variable. So we can now access this user data, and if we console log here, we should see our user data which we can consume in this component. So if I console log user and I save, take a look. So this is small error. We have to reorder some imports here in the user context. React has to be at the top somewhere here. And if we save now and take a look, notice this is the user data we're expecting to see. The name Joe H23. So that console log has actually worked and everything is working as expected. We can consume this user data which we exported here. We can consume the user data in this products component. The only problem now is we didn't provide the possibility of updating this user data from the consuming components. So we need to provide that possibility, and we can use the set state. We can make this user data a state variable, so that we use the use state, for example. You can make this user data that set user. You can make this user data pass the username was Joe and the age 23. So we can pass this user data alongside the set user method. So if we pass this to, we can access both of them here in the component and use it to modify this user state at will. So that's an option, using the set user, the way we use set state normally to modify a state variable. You can do the same and modify the user by passing down. So we are going to be grabbing the user here and set user, which we can use to modify the user data. And another way to accomplish that is to use the use reducer instead of use state. Use reducer is going to be more robust because you can pass a specific action which you are going to use to modify the user data. So for the use reducer, you have this second parameter here, which is the initial state, and you have a first parameter which is the reducer function which we are using to update the user. Use reducer. Let me call this one user reducer. User reducer. So we are going to create this user reducer method function which we are going to be using to update the user. And from this method call, the first parameter of the array is the user, and the second one is a certain dispatch function which we can use to dispatch actions to update the user. So how is this use reducer? How does this use reducer function look like? So it's a method, it's a function const use reducer, and the first parameter is the state, which is actually being shared across the different components, and you have an action, which is what you use to update the state. So inside the body of this function, you just need to evaluate the type, the action type, and decide on the value you want to return. So for example, in most cases, we are going to be using the switch state. We are going to be using the switch cases to evaluate the action type on that parameter. So action type is what we are going to be evaluating here. And in case we are going to be looking now at the different values this action type can take. So let's just take a look. We are just going to create our own action type here, which we are going to call update user. And if the action type is update user, what we are going to do is we are going to return just the payload. because in this case we know the payload is going to be the user, the new user wants to update. We're just going to use that single case here, but we can have multiple cases here. We can have another case for delete user, which we can use to delete the user. But let's just stick with this simple case for now. And for the default, we are going to return just the initial state. Okay, so with this now, we have this user with user function, which we pass to our use with user. And use user has not been imported, but it's imported from React as well. So we import use with user from React. Okay, with this now together, we have our user, which is actually this user with an initial state of name Joe and age 20 and a dispatch function we can use to update the user. We're going to pass user here, and we're also going to pass the dispatch as well, so that we can use to dispatch actions to update the user. Dispatch, yes. Okay, in our products component, which in this case we use user and set user, we're going to be grabbing dispatch now, which you can use to update the user. And what we are going to do is, we are first of all going to initially console log the user, so that you see the initial value of the user, which is going to be what we expect to see here: name Joe and age 20 TV. So if I save this and we take a look in our terminal, we see the initial state name Joe and age 20 TV. So we're going to update now this user with a name of Joe and age 20 TV using this dispatch method, which is provided from the user. So in the useEffect, when the component loads, what we are going to do is we are going to call now this dispatch method. And the way the dispatch method works is it takes two parameters. So the first one is the action type, and the second one is the value we want to pass. So if you remember from this function, we have two parameters, state and action. The action is actually what we are passing to this dispatch method. So the action has a type and it has a payload. The type is actually the first parameter, which is passed to the dispatch, and the payload is the second parameter. So this dispatch is actually an object. So actually we have now the type, which is actually the first parameter. As we see here, action.type. It's actually the first properties of this. So we have type, this case, which is going to be it has to be update user from here. So we want to update the user, and the payload we want to payload, which is the second property, action.payload. So we want to update the user now and pass a new user. Instead of the user being name Joe and age 20 TV, we are going to pass a new user with a name of, let's say, Sam, and age of 20. So this useEffect is going to run only when the component loads on the first mount of the component. After that, when the state of the user is updated, the component is going to be render. So this console log of user is going to lock the new user value, which is Sam and age of 20. If we save now, take a look. useEffect is not defined, so I have to import the useEffect here from here. So if I refresh, okay, so if you take a look at our log now, we see that initially when the component mounted, user was this initial user value, which was Joe and age of 20 TV. And in our use effect, when we dispatch now an action and update the user to a name of Sam and an age of 20, you notice now that we have a new value of name Sam and age 20. So that's how you can use the context to share state across different components. And it's very interesting because any component which is wrapped inside this context is going to be able to share that user value and method to update the user. So if you come to our app.js and wrap both products and home with the context, this user context provider, it means we are going to be able to have access to this user data. We are going to have access to this user data as well in our home component. So if you go to our home component and we try to access the user data from the use context as well. So I'm going to say const, I'm going to destructure the user from the context. So I'm going to call it use context, passing our user context. So I'm going to comment this present user data so that we are not so and this set user. I'm going to comment all this just so that I console log only the user. So this present user, we are going to be able to have access to that user data as well in this home JS component. So if we console log user, let's just see, console log user. Let's say user from home, so that it should be a bit more explicit. User from home component. User in home component and user. So if we console log this, we should also be able to see that same user data here in our home component. Take a look here. See that user in home is the same user data which we expected to see. So you see that you can share this user data across different components and update them from any component, and all the components that share that data are going to have the updated value. So that's very interesting using context in React. Okay, so with that out of the way, the next thing we're going to be looking at is the React router. So the React router is also very important, and the React router is going to permit you to be able to navigate from one component to the next in React. So you just need to pass in a certain path, and with that path you can navigate from one component to the next. That's routing in essence. So the way the React route, for you to be able to work with the React router in React, you first of all need to install an npm package for React known as the React router DOM. I've already gone ahead and installed that package. If I go to our package JSON, you're going to see that I have the React router DOM. Seems I've not installed it. So you need to go ahead and install. Okay, let's go ahead and install npm install React router DOM. So when the React router package, so while this package is getting installed, let's go ahead and put down the necessary code for implementing routing in React. So to implement routing in React, we are going to go to our root component, the app.js, and you have to import some different functionalities from the React router DOM. So the first thing we're going to be importing is the browser router. So we're going to import a couple of things from the React router DOM. We're going to import the browser router. We're going to import route, and we're going to import route from React router DOM. Okay, it's not yet installed, so that's why we have this error here. But when the installation is complete, things are going to work fine. Okay, what we do now is we surround all the components. Let's take away this context provider. We can still leave it in there, it's no problem. If we want to share state across different components, we can still leave it in, but I'm just going to take it out for now, just to make working, just so that we focus our attention the on routing with the React router. So we're going to surround everything with the browser router. So I'm going to have here browser router. It's going to surround everything. That's the first thing you need to do. Surround everything with the browser router. The next thing you need to do is you need to use what you call routes as well to create different routes for different components. So you are going to surround everything as well with routes. You're going to have here routes. We have here browser router, you have routes. So you have this path as well inside routes. And what you need to do finally is to create routes for the different components. So you have home and products, and you need to create routes for these different components. So we're going to create a route for the home component. So it's the route component in this case. Route, create a path, so you can see when the user navigates to let's just say the home component is the home component is actually the root route. So we're just going to say when he navigates to slash, then the element that should be loaded should be the home component. And we're going to do something similar for the products. When the user navigates to slash products, the element that should be loaded should be the products component. So, and basically that's all about routing in React. It's very simple. So format, yeah. Basically that's all about routing in React. Very simple. You have the browser router which you import, you have the routes which you import, and you have route. So each component you want to route to has to be wrapped inside this route element. It has to have a path, and you precise the element you should route to when the user navigates to this path. Okay, our React router DOM is installed. We save now and take a look in our browser. Notice that we are the root path, which is okay. Since as we took away, we are getting errors because we took away the context, and we are still using the context in the different components. So we are already taking out the context. So I can just go ahead and put in the context just so that we don't have those errors. So I'm going to wrap all this with the context provider. I'm just going to put our context provider there. Context is user context provider. Just so that we don't have those errors. Okay. Okay, you see that we're presently at the root component, which is at slash. Because if you notice here, the path when the path is slash, it should load the home component. So we're presently at slash, and localhost 3000 is the same as localhost 3000 slash. So it's basically the same route. So we're at the root route here, and that's why we're seeing the home component being displayed. This is actually the home component. And if we go to slash products, which is this other route, which is this next route here, it should display us the products component. So if I hit enter, see that it displays us the products component, products content. And that's basically how routing works in React. It's very simple at that stage, at this level. And we can go ahead further to, if we have a nav bar in our home component, like we know that there is a shared nav bar across the different components, our home and using a certain shared nav bar. So we can use the link from React router, so the link component link that is going to import. So I'm going to use here import the structure link from React router DOM. And if we the structure link from React router DOM link, so I'm going to wrap all this with links link. And when you use the link, you now have an attribute. If I remember, link to. So you precise where you want to link. You precise the route you want to link to when the user clicks on this link. So we are going to be linking to forward slash when the user clicks on home, and we are going to be linking to slash products when the user clicks on products. So when the user clicks on home, it's going to come to our home component, to our app.js, and load this home component because it's on the path forward slash. And when the user clicks on products, it's going to load this products component because it's on the path slash products. So if we save now, take a look here. So we have our home, products, and about. So presently we're at products, which is this, but the user clicks on home, you see that it loads the home component, and which is on forward slash, and when the user clicks on products, it loads the products component. So that's basic routing in React, and I think we have covered everything on React. Like we have a solid understanding of React now. We looked at React, we looked at how to create a React app, file structures, pages, components, hooks, context, and the router, which are the building blocks for React. And in upcoming videos, I'm going to be looking at more interesting aspects like using TypeScript in React. We're going to be working on projects where we use the React context, and I'm going to also be showing you guys some best practices when using React, and some other interesting React libraries you are going to need, like the material UI for React, and some many. Basically, you can leave your own propositions as well in the comment section, and I'm going to address that with some interesting tutorials to solve your problems. So guys, that's it for this video. I know you got much value from this tutorial because I basically put in much energy to creating this video. So to show your support, guys, like this video and subscribe to this channel for more interesting content like this coming up in the future.